Ever since the disappointment of Street Fighter V, I've been cautiously looking towards the future of the Street Fighter franchise. Having been a lifelong fan, I've always wanted the absolute best for this franchise simply because of how revolutionary it has always been. While we can all agree that Street Fighter V finally redeemed itself, even though it cost a ridiculous amount of money if you were buying things as they released instead of waiting for complete editions to do it, Street Fighter V ultimately became a decent title that many fans reluctantly accepted after it initially broke our hearts at launch. Once we confirmed that Street Fighter VI was a thing, questions have been looming over what the future holds and whether or not Capcom can earn its place back in our hearts. While I have a lot of nitpicks about Street Fighter VI, I can ultimately say that this closed beta removed a lot of my fears. Opening up Street Fighter VI's closed beta, the only selectable option was to play online in online lobbies that were composed of multiple arcade cabinets which your avatar walks up to and sits at. This has been pretty much become a standard, and good God, was it fun messing around with Street Fighter VI's avatar creator. In the end, I decided to make a blob of flesh that I benevolently named Lizzo, both poking fun at the singer, but also feeling good as hell, knowing that I could present myself in the world the way I wanted to, as a strong, independent woman who don't need no man. As I paraded around the lobby, it's a crime that I didn't have the option to twerk while waiting for a spot to open, so I randomly jiggled back and forth as I waited in anticipation as if there was a 2-for-1 special at Golden Corral. Jumping into the game was actually pretty easy. You simply sit at a cabinet and you're greeted with the option to go into solo practice mode or wait patiently for a challenger to arrive. What I didn't find too enjoyable was not having a way to change my chosen fighter once seated. If you're not paying attention, you'll completely miss that you have to press a button to choose both your fighter, control scheme, and color type before you ready up. Having an option to do this before choosing the solo mode kind of sucked because you have to commit to playing a character whom you may or may not have even wanted once you've played some time in solo training mode. For example, Alex was kind of a bore to play, and I just really wanted to go back to my old trusty Ryu. I could swap to him just fine in solo play, but once the challenger came, I was Alex if I didn't leave the machine and re-up. I understand the reasoning behind eliminating the character select screens, but there's something classically old school about that feeling that I don't think saving a few seconds is worth missing out on. I jumped into this thing completely blind, so you can only imagine my surprise when instead of having 6 attack buttons, I was greeted with a streamlined control scheme that's more closely comparable to Marvel vs. Capcom 3 than what I had anticipated for Street Fighter. Thanks, Capcom, I hate it. I played a few matches with it and figured out it wasn't as awful as I originally perceived it, but I felt like I didn't have nearly enough control over the basic fight commands. The modern control scheme is probably pretty cool for playing as characters you've never played or trying out new characters such as Alex and Jamie. I ultimately still preferred manual mode, so I had a little more of an idea of what I was doing. Once I sorted out the control scheme, I found myself having a lot of fun with Street Fighter VI's new stylish presentation. Similar to the watercolor look of 4, 6 opts for a more urban style using spray paint and paint splashes. This was visually appealing and sparked joy while baiting people into making stupid mistakes or simply eating some minor damage while unleashing a drive impact move. It's essentially a way to God crush someone who's turtling, and that's a welcome addition to basic combat. This move can be used multiple times per match, and you have an armor when using it, so you can definitely power through weak attacks to land it. This mechanic is a blast to learn and work around and made basic fighting feel fresh again. There's more to talk about with the drive gauge at another time, but I suck and I'm not that good yet, so we're only going to lightly glaze over it for now. Let's talk about one thing that always matters in fighting games, the soundtrack. Capcom certainly had no problem throwing a few bucks at Exile and Flow Rider for Street Fighter 4's iconic The Next Door, Indestructible, and that song is beloved because of it. We were perhaps a little too lenient on Street Fighter V being bare bones to not even care that it didn't have a hike theme, though it did finally get one in the arcade edition, but Street Fighter VI's theme really should have gotten the people they've tried to sound a lot like for real. Street Fighter VI's theme song, Not on the Sideline, sounds like a guy doing one of the worst Young Jeezy impressions of all time. God knows that Capcom absolutely could afford to throw money at anyone they wanted to for a franchise as large as Street Fighter, so the decision to go with the great value brand sound-alike is beyond me. I'm sure it ain't cheap to license Kanye West if you wanted to use Put On, but I'm sure Young Jeezy would have done this song at an affordable rate. Aside from clowning the theme song, the rest of the soundtrack is still pretty questionable. Like, why does Guile's theme sound more like a remix of Blanca's Jungle theme, while Blanca's theme sounds like they're trying to make him Cuban? Ken's theme at least has some callbacks to his Street Fighter II theme, as does Chun-Li's, and there's also a nod to the original Street Fighter II character select theme found in the other random menu music throughout the demo. As a whole, though, I don't really understand what they're trying to accomplish with the music options here. Several of the themes ramp up like they're gonna go hard, and then they just never follow through. Jamie's theme, for example, sounds like it's gonna be a jazzy number with some slight oriental elements, but it eventually evolves into a weird disco thing that wishes it could have been in Persona. I don't know, maybe I'm just getting too old for this weird amalgamation of mashups, but most of the themes are forgettable. I could probably go on for a good while with my impressions, but in closing, I did want to mention that the netcode seemed extremely solid, even with the servers having connection issues throughout the weekend. While I'm disappointed that I could never get the beta to connect on my Steam Deck, I had a lot of fun with it on my laptop playing cross-platform with anyone who was on with seemingly no direct advantage related to platform of choice. I can't wait to play more of this in the future, and I really hope they nerf Jamie because he seemed hella broken. That or everyone who I fought as him were already really damn good at him, and they need to buff Luke because he seemed extremely underpowered. If they wait and release Street Fighter 6 in a full state instead of the bare bones for tournaments excuse like they did with Street Fighter 5, I think Street Fighter 6 might wind up being the best Street Fighter yet. I had an absolute blast playing it, and I can't wait for round 2.